What started out as a partnership in one of the most exciting movie franchises in decades quickly turned into a feud that ended up exposing the dark and harsh realities behind the curtains of Hollywood.
Megan, what is it like working with the director Michael Bay, who from all accounts appears to be insane?
He's infamous for being a sort of tyrant, I guess.
The Megan Fox versus Michael Bay beef was so surprising considering just how much each of them was liked at the time. But their polar opposite ideas of what the Transformers franchise meant to their careers created the perfect recipe for disaster. And one of the craziest parts about all of this is that she might have actually been taken out of context. Something we'll talk about at the end of the video. Megan Fox once said, "I think all women in Hollywood are known as sex symbols. That's what our purpose is in this business. You're merchandised, you're a product, you're sold, and it's based on sex. But that's okay. I think women should be empowered by that, not degraded." Megan Fox's career and relationship with Michael Bay began at a very young age. To many, at too young of an age, as it was later rumored that Megan Fox had to wash a car in a bikini for her audition of the original Transformers. To make things even worse, her role in the film Bad Boys 2 was an extra in a club dancing in a bikini in 6-inch heels. And when Michael Bay found out she was only 15, rather than have her escorted off the set, he instructed her to dance beneath the waterfall, as you can find right here on IMDb. And just how did Michael Bay respond exactly? Something we'll get to later in the video, but unfortunately it exposed a much darker and disgusting side of Hollywood. Drink your water. This relationship would open doors and set the template for Megan's future career, as she would land roles on shows like 2.5 Men and movies like Confessions of a Teenage Drama Queen, most of which would focus around her looks rather than her acting ability. In Hollywood, there's an understanding that certain roles call for someone to be unattractive or overweight or some characteristic that society might deem negative. Someone has to accept that they are ugly to audition for that opening. However, this does have an opposite in that there are roles that require women to be extremely attractive and understand that they are being objectified, a barrier that many actresses in the past have struggled to break through. Life can sometimes present opportunities based on who you know rather than what you know. So it really was no surprise that her premature relationship with Michael Bay opened those doors for her career to launch with Transformers, something that Michael Bay always felt that he gave to her. By the time Michael Bay was creating Transformers, he had already established himself as one of the heavy hitters of the movie industry. His blockbuster hits like The Rock, Armageddon, Pearl Harbor, Bad Boys 1 and 2, they had all positioned him to essentially do whatever he wanted in Hollywood. Those movies all combined to bring in over $1 billion in revenue, and when you have that much success at that level, your company or organization is going to give you that freedom. They're going to reward you. And that reward was Transformers, as he was granted nearly an unlimited budget to piece together his vision to cement his legacy. Almost every one of my channel's viewers is not subscribed to the channel. Do me a huge favor and hit that subscription button. We're trying to get monetized. My dog and I. But it wasn't always this way for Michael Bay. He had worked all the way from being an intern on the Raiders of the Lost Ark to directing a wave of music videos ranging from artists like Styx to Lionel Richie to Aerosmith to Faith Hill. And it was that relentless work ethic and consistent style that opened doors for him that presented an opportunity to direct Bad Boys 1, a movie that when compared to the second, in spectacle seems much smaller, but was received much better by critics and gave him the green light to direct Armageddon. This movie was the epitome of what 1990s blockbusters were about: world-ending stakes in an asteroid barreling towards Earth, an international movie superstar in Bruce Willis, an over-the-top love story with Ben Affleck and Liv Tyler, to a director who wanted to blow up as many things as possible. It was these back-to-back successes that would be the launching point of his career. And in the midst of all that, Michael Bay actually had an opportunity to be involved in a project that men all over the world would give almost anything to spectate, as he was the director of a centerfold piece in a September 1990 Playboy magazine. The idea that Michael Bay sexualized much of his art was no secret. Anyone that had seen any of his work would understand this. Whether or not you felt it was right, you knew when you worked with him that was exactly what you were going to get: a sexualized product with a lot of explosions. Pause. When people begin a relationship in certain power positions and the dynamics change, the relationship evolves as well. When Megan Fox and Michael Bay's paths first crossed, it was agreed upon that Michael Bay held all the power. By the third movie, the perceived belief of who had all the power versus who actually had all the power had completely changed. The first Transformers was received extremely well by both critics and audiences. With 9/11 having only been 6 years prior, the country was still very much feeling the level of patriotism that echoed throughout the culture, and this movie very much relished on that. However, that wouldn't be doing it justice, as this film introduced Shia LaBeouf to the mainstream as well, who indeed turned in a classic performance, and when coupled with some of the best CGI we've ever seen, this film became one of the best of the 2000s. Editor's note here, I can still remember the first time I saw this in theaters, how crazy everyone went when Optimus first transformed. The level of detail that showed on him when he was changing and transforming, it's really something that just represented how much care that was going into this movie, and as the movies went on, you kind of saw that detail fade away, and with it, the quality of the movies. And yet, with all that hype around this movie, with all that going for it, Megan Fox still stood out as one of the main focal points of the entire franchise. And this would be exactly where the rift between them would begin. Megan Fox's role in the first Transformers movie was pretty straightforward. Say a few things to push the story forward, help blow a few things up, but most importantly, look really good doing it. A role that throughout cinematic history has been pretty common. But just like all other characters, the love interest should also have an arc, should see their character further developed as the franchise goes on. Now, the dynamic of how a character is presented sits with the director and the writers. It can create scenes and dialogue that give the character a chance to present another layer to their character, and the director can get the most out of his actors on set, which works together to create the character. However, it's really in the editing room where Megan Fox began to feel over-objectified and undervalued. What we see on the movie screen is exactly what we get, and many people unfortunately assume that what they see on the screen is the only thing that they filmed for the movie. They don't realize how much was left on the cutting room floor. Sometimes we don't get to see the full image of what the writers had in mind when they wrote the character, and her character in the movie isn't really given much depth, and it feels like more effort and time was spent on focusing on her physical features than creating a well-rounded character. But even with her being objectified, it wasn't something that she couldn't handle, as that was part of her role, something she had signed up for and done in the past. The issues really began to surface when in the second movie, the physical demand of the actors required a lot more of them. Those ending sequences where we saw both Shia LaBeouf and Megan Fox get hurled into the air, going different directions, and one can only imagine how many times they had to reshoot those. And then when you consider all the footage they didn't include in the final cut, you can understand her frustration. Why would anyone want to go through that same grueling process but then get represented in a less valuable way than everybody else? So when in 2009, while she was on her media tour, she decided to come out and make a bold statement. He's like Napoleon, and he wants to create this insane, infamous madman reputation. He wants to be the German dictator on sets, and he is. And it's safe to say the dynamics of their relationship immediately changed. Although surprisingly, the consequences of this comment would be silent and swift, as crew members from the Transformers movies came together to write an anonymous letter. It goes on to call her dumb as a rock, thankless, classless, graceless, and unfriendly actress, and completely puts down her acting abilities. And with the way Michael Bay responded, it could not have been more telling, as it seemed he could not have had a care in the world. I wasn't hurt because I know that's just Megan. Megan loves to get a response, and she does it in kind of the wrong way. I'm sorry, Megan. I'm sorry I made you work 12 hours. I'm sorry that I'm making you show up on time. Movies are not always warm and fuzzy. It was this cold, calculated response that really spoke volumes. Her future with the franchise was no longer in his hands. Then a few months later, we got the infamous interview with Megan Fox on Late Night with Jimmy Kimmel, which essentially sealed her fate.
They brought me in, and I was wearing a Stars and Stripes bikini and a red cowboy hat and like 6-inch heels. And they said, you know, Michael, she's 15, so you can't sit her at the bar and she can't have a drink in her hand. So his solution to that problem was to then have me dancing underneath the waterfall getting soaking wet.
Whether or not right or wrong, these aren't exactly the type of accusations you can make about your boss and expect to have a job in the morning. The damage was already done. The comments she had made about that previous German dictator found their way in front of Steven Spielberg, one of the most influential figures in Hollywood history, who identifies deeply with his Jewish heritage. And to nobody's surprise, Michael Bay would later confirm that it was indeed Steven Spielberg that gave him the green light to fire her from the franchise. And unfortunately for Megan Fox, this wouldn't end here. Many believe that the way she left the Transformers series got her the label as difficult to work with, which then resulted in her being blacklisted from several studios.
Serious, drink your water.
There are certain levels of talent and success that allows you to essentially do whatever you want. Something we saw both ends of the spectrum here. Michael Bay was at a point in his career that he was going to get whatever he wanted based on his accomplishments. And Megan Fox had yet to build up that portfolio that would allow her to challenge someone like Michael Bay, and it ended up costing her career. Is it possible the franchise lost its mojo when she left? Did her departure divide the people who were working on those movies? People often forget movies are made by ordinary people. When you've been working at a company for 5 or more years and you see somebody you respect get mistreated and leave a company and be fired, it's absolutely going to impact your relationship with that company, that organization, and then in turn it's going to impact your work. And while we'll never really know the full context of their relationship and the things that happen between them, we do recognize there are a few red flags that really stand out. This scene where the Sector 7 agent is in the car with Megan Fox and Shia LaBeouf, and in that same sentence he talks about Megan Fox being in a training bra and then turns to calling her a hot criminal. That is the exact messaging that is so disturbing and confusing that we get get out of Hollywood. These are high schools being sexualized, and it'd be one thing if their relationship was just kept to the confines of the story within the movie, but the reality is she's singled out and specifically sexualized towards the viewer. She's presented specifically in a way that's meant to get a reaction out of the viewer. This is genuinely one of the most iconic movie shots from the 2000s, maybe movie history, and Michael Bay's response to her washing his car being an industry norm at the time is not something that we should have overlooked. And this is where Michael Bay's comments over the years have also come under fire, just like Jimmy Kimmel's. Bay has a track record of dismissing Megan's anecdotes when he says things like, Megan just likes to say things to get attention. While we can all acknowledge she might be a bit of a drama queen, telling someone that when it pertains to someone's personal story of having a history of being preyed upon in their mutual industry is wild behavior. Michael Bay has stated on numerous occasions that nothing outside of industry norms occurred between him and Megan Fox, which somehow he doesn't understand is the biggest problem itself. The fact that it's an industry norm to keep a 15-year-old on set in a bikini and 6-inch heels dancing underneath a waterfall after her age had been verified is a symptom of someone who's probably a tyrant on set, and even worse, being enabled by those above him. In recent years, Megan Fox's career has been looked at through a new lens, a lens that recognizes how much just disturbing and just how much predatory behavior was happening in Hollywood, and we now start to see a lot of the obstacles she was dealing with. You could almost argue that her once-in-a-generation beauty ended up closing doors for her. And after rewatching the movies, I thought to myself, was there someone who could have played the role better, or was Megan Fox actually the perfect fit? Michaela's traits of being snobby, independent, but extremely tough kind of seem like Megan Fox herself. This is one of those roles where we hear about Ryan Reynolds or The Rock playing exactly who they are in real life. Megan Fox really was Michaela Baines. And we know she pretty much mistreated everyone that she didn't like. And most of us can probably see that she wasn't the most agreeable person on set, and at times even unbearable. Megan Fox has called herself psycho many times. But there's a massive difference in someone that thinks they're just the hottest star in Hollywood versus someone who thinks they can do whatever they want to whoever they want. Before I let you go, I want to share with you these comments that came after Megan Fox's statement on the Jimmy Kimmel Live show, and it just shows how really dark and disturbing that Hollywood really is.
Was to then have me dancing underneath the waterfall getting soaking wet. And that...
Perfectly wholesome.
At 15, I was in 10th grade. So
Wow.
that's sort of a microcosm of how Bay's mind works.
Yeah, well, that's really a microcosm of how all our minds work, but some of us have the decency to repress those thoughts.
I think we can all agree that Jimmy Kimmel's response to her statement there was probably the worst things he could have said. I'm not really sure what's worse, that he's trying to project onto us that we all have those types of feelings and we have to repress them. I don't think that's very accurate. Not many people are having those thoughts. And two, that he's giving us a glimpse into Hollywood and what's probably happening behind closed doors. The worst part about all this for Megan Fox is that it's potentially all been taken out of context. What she said following her dictator comments completely changes the narrative of what she was saying. So he's a nightmare to work for, but when you get him away from the set and he's not in director mode, I kind of really enjoy his personality because he's so awkward, so hopelessly awkward. He has no social skills at all, and it's endearing to watch him. He's vulnerable and fragile in real life, and on set he's a tyrant. Shia LaBeouf and I almost die when we make a Transformers movie. He has you do some really insane things that insurance would never let you do. Was Megan Fox referring to his directing style and not so much who he was as a person? And was it possible she just used a really poor analogy? Or was she trying to be as hurtful as possible? We'll never really know, but when you hear the full story, it really makes you feel like this situation was never what we were really told. And again, all these things are alleged, so we'll never really know for sure, but I think we can all agree that one, there's a lot of weird things going on in Hollywood, and two, if you upset the wrong person, your career could be over, no matter how beautiful you are. What are your thoughts? What do you think is the real reason Megan Fox's career didn't go the way everyone thought it would? Do you think people might be blowing Michael Bay's actions out of proportion, or do you think Megan Fox was taken advantage of? Alright, that's enough yapping for today. And if you enjoyed this content, make sure you check out the video that's on the screen. It's a deep dive into the Joker's background from Christopher Nolan's Batman, and if you have any interest in comic books, you're going to want to check it out. Go out there and do something great.